Objectives. After completing this section, students should be able to manage variables in Ansible projects. Introduction to Ansible variables. Ansible supports variables that can be used to store values that can be reused throughout files in an entire Ansible project. This can help simplify creation and maintenance of a project and reduce the incidence of errors. Variables provide a convenient way to manage dynamic values for a given environment in your Ansible project. Some examples of values that variables might contain include users to create, packages to install, services to restart, files to remove, archives to retrieve from the internet. Naming variables. Variables have names which consist of a string that must start with a letter and can only contain letters, numbers, and underscores. Consider the following table that shows the difference between invalid and valid variable names. Ansible variable names. Defining variables. Variables can be defined in a bewildering variety of places in an Ansible project. However, this can be simplified to 3 basic scope levels. Global scope, variables set from the command line or Ansible configuration. Play scope, variables set in the play and related structures. Host scope, variables set on host groups and individual hosts by the inventory, fact gathering, or registered tasks. Variables in Playbooks. Defining variables in Playbooks. When writing playbooks, administrators can use their own variables and call them in a task. For example, a variable web package can be defined with a value of httpd and called by the yum module in order to install the httpd package. Playbook variables can be defined in multiple ways. One of the simplest is to place it in a vars block at the beginning of a playbook. Host variables and group variables. Inventory variables that apply directly to hosts fall into 2 broad categories: host variables that apply to a specific host, and group variables that apply to all hosts in a host group or in a group of host groups. Host variables take precedence over group variables, but variables defined by a playbook take precedence over both. One way to define host variables and group variables is to do it directly in the inventory file. This is an older approach and not preferred, but may be encountered by users. This is a host variable, Ansible_user, being defined for the host demo.example.com. Steps. Create a playbook name apache.yml. Then created playbook apache.yml and define the following variables in the vars section. Web_package, which defines the name of the package to install for the web server. Firewall_package, which defines the name of the firewall package. Web_service for the name of the web service to manage. And firewall_service for the name of the firewall service to manage. Python_pkg and rule, which defines the service to open. Create the tasks block and create the first task, which should use the yum module to make sure the latest versions of the required packages are installed. Create 2 tasks to make sure that the httpd and firewall_d services are started and enabled. Ansible Inclusion. When working with complex or long playbooks, Administrators can use separate files to divide tasks and lists of variables into smaller pieces for easier management. There are multiple ways to include task files and variables in a playbook. Playbook files can include other whole playbook files. This construct can be useful to tie together a few independent playbooks into a larger, more comprehensive playbook. Playbook inclusion is a bit more primitive than task inclusion. Let's have a lab. The include directive is used in the playbook to specify what task file to include at what point in the playbook. A vars directive can be used to set variables used by the task file, and will override playbook variables, inventory variables, registered variables, and facts defined in the task file. Assume the task file in the previous example was saved as the file environment.yml. An include directive with variables could be used in a playbook, like this. The following output shows how the tasks have been included and executed. In this case, the MariaDB server package has been installed because the variable package with a value of MariaDB server has been set by the include directive. Ansible Facts. Ansible Facts are variables that are automatically discovered by Ansible on a managed host. Facts contain host-specific information that can be used just like regular variables in plays, conditionals, loops, or any other statement that depends on a value collected from a managed host. Some of the facts gathered for a managed host might include the host name, the kernel version, the network interfaces, the IP addresses, the version of the operating system, various environment variables, the number of CPUs, the available or free memory, the available disk space. Facts are a convenient way to retrieve the state of a managed host and to determine what action to take based on that state. For example, a server can be restarted by a conditional task which is run based on a fact containing the managed host's current kernel version. The MySQL configuration file can be customized depending on the available memory reported by a fact. The IPv4 address used in a configuration file can be set based on the value of a fact.